Very nice. Thank you.
Feel softened and opened in this moment. And it's a perfect time to welcome our guest speaker, Dalia Adams, who is a minister for Unity of Vacaville, or Unity of the Valley, isn't it? For many years. But she had a very varied career before that. She was a teacher, molecular biologist, and a psychologist. So she brings so much life wisdom to her work and her messages and her lessons for us. So welcome, Dalia Adams.
I might forget, so once I end the talk, yeah, come on up. So thank you so much for having me here with you again. This is such a loving and warm community. You as a community are easy to trust. So as we talk about this today, we'll talk more about the importance of trust. If I forget to move the slides, somebody wave their hands. I was spoiled. I had a rear view of those slides in the past. So trust. You know, we don't talk about trust very much in Unity, do we? How many talks on trust have you? Yeah, you know? And yet it is so deeply at the heart of who we are meant to be. It is so deeply at the heart of our physical and psychological development. It is so deeply at the heart of our relationship with that which we call God. And to me, it seems, my sense is then we talk about the power of faith. If we don't pair it with trust, if we don't combine it with trust, our faith is not as powerful as it is when it is combined with trust. So my thought is, instead of the power of faith, it should be the power of faith and trust. But then that's my opinion. When I looked up in Google what words act as synonyms or similar words to trust, there was a fairly long list. I picked out safety, because I think that's the core of what makes trust so meaningful and so powerful, is the sense of safety that allows us to trust. It's that peace, it's that deep inner peace when we can't trust ourselves, the people around us, our environment, or when we can't trust God. We go to that consciousness that people have called hell, right? So it's reliance, it's that sense of I can rely, let's say, on this community to embrace me, to love me, to acknowledge me, to treat me well. And God forbid one day you walked in here and there was a small circle back in the corner and you could overhear that they were gossiping about you. What would happen? How would that feel? Would you be able to meet God in this place if in that moment you couldn't trust this community and that was a hypothetical, that would never ever happen, but I was just making a point, right? So that reliance is an important aspect of it. The assurance, and that's even in Charles Fillmore's definition of faith, right? The assurance of things hoped for, right? The conviction of things not seen. Well, that piece that's the assurance, the experience of assurance, is our trust that our greatest good is unfolding, because sometimes it doesn't look like it, even as it is. Anyway, I don't need to go. But But there was a time in my life where there was this man, right? He was everything. He replaced God for me. Those of you who heard my story last time, I mean, and he was an alcoholic whose alcoholism progressed and became worse and worse and worse. But I kept holding on to this, he was my all. And the trust that was underneath that kept being betrayed over and over and over again. And psychologists call that trauma, right? That's how deeply it hurts us when our trust is betrayed. Tara Brach, who is a teacher of Buddhist meditation, mindfulness meditation, one of my teachers when I became certified in mindfulness meditation as a teacher, she said, and I'm paraphrasing because she had a longer statement, she said, there is one quality that determines our capacity for happiness, our capacity for intimacy, and our capacity for living collaboratively, and that's trust. Without that, we can't have any of those. So as a psychologist, I learned that the most renowned and famous teacher, the psychologist who formulated theories about human development, especially how children develop, his name is Erik Erikson, and he took life changes from infancy through adulthood and talked about what the important challenges were in each stage. And the very first stage of life, the task or the challenge, is to develop trust and to recognize the difference between trust and mistrust. And then he taught extensively about the gifts that a child grows up with when that child grows up with trust. And on the other hand, when a child's environment, home, is a dangerous place, and sadly, that's the case, then that child grows up with both physical, psychological, emotional consequences that can last a lifetime, that can be carried oftentimes in the body as physical pain, often psychologically as in the inability to form healthy relationships, sometimes in a sense of I'm not worthy that blocks people as they move through their lives and careers. So the very first task in life, according to Erikson, is hopefully to be able to learn to trust your environment and to recognize when your environment, when the people around you are not trustworthy. Now, even though that's the very first stage, it's not like by the time you're 3, you're done with that task. It's a lifelong task that begins in infancy. I think today about our teenagers and how a lot of their social life is online. Normally, in the olden days, what felt normal to me is when I was growing up and when my son was growing up, my granddaughter, when she was little, trust had to be formed in a relatively small circle. There'd be 5, 6 playmates, or if it was a larger group, maybe we're up to 20, 25. And there was a time when they were trying to keep the classroom small, 20 or 25, to allow children to interact in greater safety. And so imagine a teenager now where his or her connections are potentially thousands of people from around the world. And what if 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 of them are not trustworthy and start bullying or attacking? So now that teenager's social circle becomes a very painful place to be instead of a community like this that embraces and loves them. I mean, because you can have many who do, but if there's a pocket who don't, like the example I gave, this is a loving place for each of you, and a place where you can trust unconditionally. And if there were 3 or 4 people gossiping, that sense of trust could be shattered even though most of the people were supportive of you. So I think of our poor teenagers and what they have to learn to contend with, because this process of learning to trust, like I said, goes deep and it's lifelong. Is this the right way? Yeah. So the process of trust is essential for our physical health, for our psychological development, and it is a key component of our spiritual unfoldment. So as a psychologist, one of the areas I really loved working in was health psychology, and I was trained in a process called biofeedback. How many people are familiar with that? Yeah, that's where you can get connected to a computer screen and we can measure your muscle tension, the reactivity that's happening in your bloodstream, what's happening with your brain waves, with your heartbeat, what's happening with your blood pressure. But have it all there as a screen that you can look at and learn from. And people can use that type of information to learn how to relax, to learn how to focus their minds. Children with ADD or adults with ADD can use that to focus their brain waves. It's a matter of seeing what happens when you breathe, seeing what happens when you think a scary thought, seeing what happens when your heart opens up. Don't we tell people, open your heart? We don't often teach them how, but we say, open your heart. So when I was trained in biofeedback, there was a specialized advanced training called RSA training. And it's become popularized by an organization called HeartMath. How many people are familiar with HeartMath? A few. And it's been taught in Unity churches. And what HeartMath is doing is teaching what the physiologists and the psychologists and the doctors had worked up, is that when we open our hearts start beating in a different fashion, our blood pressure changes, and we become healthier, physically healthier. And the way that happens allows us to be psychologically more at peace. And the way this HeartMath and RSA training begins is people are hooked up to some sort of monitor, a little gizmo, or, all these sensors in a computer. And the instructions are, think of someone that you love unconditionally. Take a moment right now. Someone that you love dearly and unconditionally, but not someone you got into an argument with this morning, okay? Because sometimes it's someone who in the moment just feels wonderful to think about. It can be a pet, it can be a child, a grandchild, a partner, sister, brother, friend. And then just breathe 2 or 3 breaths as you're thinking about that person or that friend, that 4-legged friend. And notice how that feels. For some people, you can actually feel the warmth. So what's happening is the heartbeat it jumped, but it's a good thing it jumped. Your heartbeat at that moment, the heart rate changes slowly from faster to slightly slower to slightly faster. You know how sometimes you hear 70 beats a minute is good, or if you're trying to raise your heart rate to lose weight, you need to take it up to 90 beats a minute. Well, that makes it sound like our heart rate stays at one place. It doesn't. The heart rate changes slowly and evenly or erratically. And when the heart rate is changing and goes from a little faster to a little slower to a little faster, that indicates your heart is flexible and it's reacting to its environment in a way that indicates you trust the place you're in, the people we're in, the person you're thinking about. And when that happens, when I would work with patients and I would hook up the thing that measured their blood pressure also doesn't stay exactly in one place. It goes slightly up and down also. The blood pressure and the heart rate pretty much line up. Not exactly, but just about. It's amazingly how close they become. The blood pressure variation, the heart rate variation. And then if I measure their breathing, all three line up. The heart rate variation, the blood pressure variation, the rate of the breath, and it all hovers between 6 and 7 breaths or variations a minute, closer to 7. And what's really amazing is the geophysicists who measure the magnetic resonance, and that means the magnetic field and how it changes for the Earth, for the entire planet, lines up. It's also at a rate of almost 7 waves per minute. That blows me away, right? So when we get into this state that could be measured physically, we are aligned with the energy that's moving our planet. So to me, that says we must be aligned with the energy that is the divine energy, the energy of God. We cannot achieve this if our inner state is a state of mistrust. The only way we can get here is when we think of that person who in that moment we trust fully, and we access that inner experience of trust. Without that, when we're in a state of fear, or had you walked in and seen those people gossiping about you, this is how your heart rate would look. And when we're chronically or often in that state, that's what puts us at risk for heart disease, for anxiety, for depression, for a sense of alienation from that which we call God, right? So enough of all that science. Have I lost you all? Okay. So again, I keep saying this over and over, but trust is significant in our experience of our families, in our experience of our friends, in the workplace, in our communities, in our church communities. And trust is really key to having that intimate and very real sense of God presence. Has anybody ever in here gone through a moment where you didn't trust God? Yeah. I mean, and I'm not trying to use foul language, but I clearly remember one night, it was after my mother died, and she died suddenly, and she died relatively young. I remember sitting on the grass on the hillside thinking God was nothing but an SOB, right? And it took me a long time to move from that to a sense of I can trust God again. But when we are that disconnected, there is something within us that doesn't feel complete. Those powers you learned about recently do not seem accessible. Our minds go round and round and round with that stuff that makes us feel miserable. So to trust in that which we call God is really key to our spiritual life, even though it generally is not emphasized too much in unity. It is in hidden ways, we just don't acknowledge it. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, I love the Proverbs in the Bible. And one of my favorite Proverbs, Proverb 3, verse 5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and do not lean on your own understanding." So in those moments when you are wanting to manifest a new home or money enough to pay your bills or a trip to visit a family member and nothing seems to be working out, those are the moments we need to trust that that divine power is acting in the moment no matter what it looks like. And that's what we were taught when we learn about faith. But we can do that intellectually, but in our hearts not feel it, right? So when we can get to that point of we can feel it, that's what trust feels like. Faith is an activity to me of the mind, and trust is an activity of the heart. The way we do bring up trust in unity, and quite often, is in our prosperity teachings. Our teachings about manifestation and the power of our minds and our intention and our faith. Georgiana Tree West is one of Unity's prosperity teachers. Is anyone familiar with her? Okay. Yeah, you need to go to LUT school and then you'll, but she taught wonderful things about prosperity. And she has a book called The Prosperity 10 Commandments, and one of the chapters, one of the commandments is, you shall let go and let God do it. Well, letting go is an act of trust, very deeply an act of trust. If you were standing at the edge of a cliff and a bear was chasing you down the way and you heard God's voice say, jump, you'd want to know that, one, it was only 2-3 feet, or that there was a safety net, something to grab onto, right? You need to be able to trust that if you take those leaps, if you open your heart, that you will be safe. You need that assurance. The other thing that Georgiana Tree West said, in every demonstration, every time we're trying to manifest something, there must be resting periods. You know, sometimes we work it to death. We affirm, and nothing's happened, so we affirm, and there has to be a time when we affirm, let go, trust, and just rest in that trust. And that's when our manifestation powers are the most powerful. And it's not just in the Judeo-Christian tradition where we're taught to trust. And it's not just in the unity message of letting go and letting God. But in the Bhagavad Gita, I always have trouble pronouncing that, Krishna, the Lord Krishna, is speaking to his student Arjuna. And he says, I am the self, with a capital S. And in the Eastern scriptures, that capital S means that inner presence, the I am, that presence within us. And Krishna says, I am the self, Arjuna, seated in the heart of every creature. All of your fears, all of your disappointments, offer them to me. There was a woman during World War II that became a quiet but very powerful hero in her work to help rescue the Jewish people who were fleeing from Hitler. Her name was Corrie ten Boom, and she hid the people who were running at great risk to her own self. And I love her quote. She said, "Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." So it's in the moments of the unknown that we are called to trust, and we are called to trust in God, in that divinity within us, in the strength and the power that is ours through that presence that is God. So I invite everyone today to make a decision, a choice to trust. The gifts are great. Today I choose to trust. And so it is. And so now let us take that into a time of meditation. I invite you to sit comfortably. Allow your breath to find its own easy and natural rhythm. And for a little while, simply notice the movement of your breath. Notice how the breath feels when you breathe in and when you breathe out. Notice how your body feels when you breathe in and when you breathe out. And you may even notice that each breath takes you a little deeper. Deeper within. Deep into that sacred space within you, where you know and experience the presence that is God. Now allow yourself in this moment to remember, to imagine the many thousands of ways your life has been blessed through that presence within you. Allowing your heart to open to that presence. Allowing your heart to open to the God of your being. To the God in which you live and move and have your being. Within that sacred space, you stand before the God of your being. You trust. And you say, "Here I am, Lord. Here I am." I trust in you, the presence of God within me. And so holding that trust in your heart, join with me in gratitude for all that is divine, all that is good, all that is trustworthy in your life in this moment. And join with me in saying thank you. Thank you, God. Amen. And then when you're ready, allow yourself to open your eyes gently and easily. Allow yourself to be fully present in this room, this time, this place. And then look around and see the light of the Christ shining on each and every face. Look around and see that Christ's presence in each person. Look around and see the people that you trust and you hold dear. And know that they see all of that in you. And so it is.